Welcome to the Filson Historical Society. We're Kentucky's oldest continuously operated historical society. We're Kentucky's privately supported historical society and its largest private research library. You're in for a treat today because we're going to go behind the scenes here at the Filson where people don't normally see. It's a staff-only area, and you'll get to see where we keep the treasures that we've been collecting and preserving for posterity. So go ahead and just come this way. Well, here we are in kind of the bowels of the Filson. This is one level of 6 levels of stacks where we keep our collections. We've been collecting since 1884. We collect, preserve, and tell the significant stories of Kentucky, the Ohio Valley, the Upper South. In the course of accomplishing that mission, as you can see, we've collected a lot of things. We have about 2 million manuscript items. We have over 40,000 printed titles, maps, scrapbooks, theater programs, all kinds of things. And we keep collecting. History happens right up to today. So 20th century material is now much more collectible than it was even 20 or 30 years ago. And so we keep fine-tuning that mission, looking ahead, trying to see the big picture. Some of our treasures happen to be of that early period, that pioneer, that frontier period, dating back to the founding of Louisville in 1778. George Rogers Clark came down with his little flotilla on his Illinois expedition, and he went with just about 180 men on down the river and then into Illinois and captured in Vincennes, Indiana, and captured 3 British forts in 1778. And this is his account dictated to his clerk, Angus Cameron, when he got back to Louisville in November of that year, or it's written in November of 1779. And you can see this is a little tab as Louisville, Falls of Ohio, November 1779. It's over a 70-page account talking about the expedition. It's the earliest thorough account of the expedition in which he combined his own notes, a diary he had kept, some journals and letters from others, and then he signs off at the end. A little smeared, but that's George Rogers Clark's signature. He sent this to his friend and kind of mentor George Mason back in Virginia, and it was in the Mason family. It eventually made its way back to Kentucky and has been a part of our collection here at the Filson for many, many years. As the story goes, George Rogers Clark was taught by George Mason. He was kind of a tutor for him, a mentor, and then they kept in touch. The Clarks back in Virginia were of that kind of gentry level, and so they knew. In fact, George Rogers Clark's father, John Clark, actually hired Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson as family attorneys. And so they knew some of these famous names back in Virginia, but then the Clarks chose to go west. Everybody's heard of the Lewis and Clark expedition. And what many people don't realize is that the Lewis and Clark expedition has very deep roots here in Louisville and in Kentucky, because it was in the fall of 1803 that Lewis and Clark met in Louisville, and that from here then in October, from the falls of the Ohio, they set off. Many historians believe that this is the only verified animal artifact from the expedition. It's the horn of a bighorn sheep. We know from information that William Clark provided and from family tradition that this was given in 1806. He brought it back from the mountains, from when they left Fort Mandan, gone to the Pacific and back. They kept collecting things. And this was given to his sister Fanny. And family tradition states that the family used it as a doorstop for many years, and perhaps that's the only reason it survived. We know that most of the items sent back by Lewis and Clark that went to individuals, that went to the government, have been lost. Part of their mission for Thomas Jefferson and for the United States government was to see what was out west. They didn't know what was out there. It was thought that mastodons and might still roam out there. There were mountains of salt. They wanted to know about the native peoples. And they believed there was a water route to the Pacific Ocean. So Thomas Jefferson and others gave the explorers a whole list of things to do. And one of the things they were supposed to do, because Thomas Jefferson himself was an avid collector, was bring things back so we can look at them, can learn from them. They even sent live animals back. Some prairie dogs and birds actually made it back to the East Coast But many things were stuffed or they were skins, things like that. They were antlers, horns, what have you. So this is one of the treasures that we have, and it links in very nicely, very importantly, with some of our Lewis and Clark manuscript material. Here, and this is how you never know how history is going to be preserved and where it's going to turn up. Because in 1988, here in Louisville, a cache of family papers were found in an attic. And among those papers were some 50 letters written by William Clark. And among those 50 letters were 5 previously unknown Lewis and Clark expedition date letters. And this one, written by William Clark from Fort Mandan in April of 1805, was his last communication to his family before they went truly for Euro-Americans into the unknown. And what he does, he's writing this to his brother Jonathan, who lived here in Louisville, and he essentially says, okay, this is what we're doing, this is what we're sending back. He lists over 30 items that are being sent back for family and friends. Again, he was, he knew that people back home wanted souvenirs, that he was, in a way, kind of a tourist, going on a very big tour all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And so he lists all these. We don't know where any of these are. They've been lost. The provenance is broken down. That's what makes the bighorn sheephorn that we have so much, so important to history to have that survive. And truly significant, this letter is again, it's historically priceless. We know because of just a throw-off mention in this letter that York, who was Clark's enslaved African American, we know because of this letter that York was married at the time of the expedition, which the men weren't supposed to be. They were supposed to be all single men because they didn't know if they'd ever come back or not. It says that I send the one marked John Shields, who was the other married man on the expedition, is sending a buffalo robe to his wife. And he says, 2 others, York tells me that he has put up in the 3rd box 2 robes for his wife and Ben, as marked. And then in a wonderful kind of send-off, he ends his letter with saying, because again, they're stepping off into the unknown, when I shall have the pleasure of seeing you again is uncertain. I fear not sooner than next July, 12 months. The country before me is extensive and unexplored. And it was. This is now, they were stepping off kind of the edge of the earth and didn't know when they would be back. Clark actually makes a pretty good guess. They arrive in St. Louis in September of 1806, and so he was only off by a couple of months. This is a good letter because this is the day after they get back. This is September 24th, 1806, written from St. Louis, and he says, I wrote you a letter last night giving you a summary sketch of our journey, and that was the famous letter, which we also have here at the Filson, of the one that was published, saying, we're back, we made it, we're not dead, we're not captured, we're not in a Mexican prison, as some people believed, things like that, that we made it back. And then he realized that he didn't specifically tell his brother Jonathan to make sure my letter is published. So he puts a little note on here, pleased to have my letter of yesterday published, because they knew that was the way to get the word out and to make sure that people knew that they had gotten home again. This is just a random sampling of the many, many things that we have here that bring researchers to the Filson from around the world, not only across the country, but they come from abroad, because much of what we have here is unique. And if you're going to do research and learn about your topic and learn about American history primarily, Kentucky history, Ohio Valley history, you're going to come here to the Filson and use our collections.